What's up everyone, welcome back to the channel. So I'm back again here with some KBF content here, some KBF updates on the ongoing playoffs, and without further ado, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that bell because it helps me out a ton. And without further ado, let me just get into it. So we're just gonna start off with the Equity Hawks vs ZTEX Box series. This is actually a really interesting series considering the fact that these two teams met in last year's postseason, and this year is just going to be very different because ZTEC, after that loss in last year's postseason, they had to do some retooling, and they brought in some key pieces in there, and their mid-season acquisition of Medina Court really is paying off right now, especially in the rebounds. And ZTEC comfortably, I can say, started off the game pretty well. They didn't look they just went on the attack immediately, and they were just knocking down those shots, and the shots they took actually changed the whole momentum of the game, despite the score being very close. Despite even having like a small scoring spread, you could see ZTEC knew what they needed to do so that they can be able to grab that win, and grab that win they did, because right now they're leading 1-0, and game 2 is going to be slated to today. So we're just gonna see what adjustments that the Equity Hawks have made, considering the fact that the Equity Hawks, they won that series in the semis and they punched that ticket to the finals comfortably. But I don't think this ZTEC Box team are ready to go down without a fight. So this series might play out all 5 games, considering the fact that both teams are pretty solid and pretty good. And looking at the way the ZTEC Box are playing, there's a high likelihood that they might even be able to steal game 2 if they come out with that same energy. But time will tell, because Equity have the experience. They played in zone 5 last year. Not even to say that this loss was pretty bad, but if you look at even the people on the roster, these are players that have played for the national team. These are players that know how to play and know how to make the adjustments, because you can see some of those players on that squad, they have the captain of the women's national team in there, so she knows how to adjust. She knows how to play there. She knows how to play it, in the playoffs. Considering the fact that even they made the finals, but they lost, but that experience is still there. She played. The Equity Hawks played in the last year's zone 5, so you could see they have a lot of they have a lot of experience in there. But looking at the way the ZTEC Sparks are coming in roaring, and they're coming in very fast, and they don't want to make any mistakes and lose that game. They have the ability to go up 2-0, but Equity, more likely they must tie up the series. They don't want to have a win or go home situation like the Lindsay Warriors, but we'll get to that. But looking at the way the game panned out, it was actually pretty close, and the Equity Hawks should come out strong, and they should be able to pick their shots pretty well, not like the way they started off in game 1, because game 1 you could just see they just looked like they didn't want to be there, and they just looked like frazzled in there, especially with those back-to-back threes that the ZTEC Sparks were just sinking. So game 2 slated today. We just have to wait and see what's gonna happen. So moving on to the Equity Dumas versus the Lindsay Warriors series. It's actually a series that's pretty interesting. We've got 2 heavyweight teams, 2 money teams that did some acquisitions in the off season, but I can say the team that splurged the cash in that off season was the Equity Dumas. They knew what players they needed and they brought them in, especially considering the fact that the way the season ended last year, it was actually pretty depressing for the Equity Dumas side, because all that investment that they made and didn't pan out in last year's postseason, especially blowing a 2-0 lead in the semis to KPA, really made them go back to the drawing board and acquire those pieces that they needed to contend. So Equity, they're up 2-0, and looking at the way the Lindsay Warriors came out in game 1 and game 2, you could just see that they didn't make a lot of adjustments offensively. After that, Eldonets, after sweeping the Eldonets, even you could see those games that they won against the Eldonets, they actually not, they're actually pretty close. So you could see they didn't make the adjustments that they needed to, compete in the playoffs. And when they meet a top-sided, top-heavy team like Equity, they just didn't have the ability to adjust in there. And it's evident because if you look at even the scores, you could see the Ulinzi Warriors did not start fast enough. They were over relying on physical basketball instead of like going back to your roots and play some intelligent and tactical basketball that had led them to the KBF finals. So you could see Ulinzi, they were just being outplayed by the Equity Dumas, and the Equity Dumas have some very good pieces in there. You've got a team that knows how to play cohesive basketball, and you have a team that they have bodies to throw out your best players. So when you have in the playoffs, you have to know what lineups and what teams to match up against the other teams and the other teams' lineups. So Lindsay, the technical bench, and the players and the way they are making decisions on the court led them to this point where they're down 0-2, and they are one win away from being knocked out in the semis, and the Equity are one win away from making the KBF final. So looking at the way the Ulinzi Warriors are right now is actually a very sad state, because this is a team that made the finals last year, and they lost, and they went the distance, but they lost in game 5 to KPA. So them losing in the semis will mean that they're going to be locked out of BAL contention, as Equity I just don't see a situation where they're gonna blow a 2-0 lead the way they did to KPA, and considering the fact that this game is gonna happen in Nairobi, so Ulinzi have one shot to play game 3 right. If they don't, they're just out like that, and it'll be very embarrassing to see the Ulinzi side just go out with a sweep, because it just doesn't happen. Teams like Ulinzi they're the teams that hand out sweeps. They don't get swept, but maybe there's a first time for everything. Maybe Equity are going to do that. But moving on to the KPA franchise, we're going to start off with the women's side. KPA women's team, they matched up against Strathmore, and it was just a one-sided beatdown, just like they did the JCOT Lynx. KPA up 1-0 on the Strathmore Swords, and game 2 is going to happen today. So my spidey senses are telling me that KPA are going to win game 2 in convincing fashion, because they have all the experience, they have all the pieces, they have everything to contend and go back to back. And the only team that can pose a threat are on the other bracket. It's either Ulinzi, it's not even Ulinzi, it's either Equity or ZTech. So out of those two teams, those are the only teams that have the ability to challenge the KPA Dockers women's team. So I don't know why I mentioned Ulinzi. Maybe it's because they are down 2-0, but they're down 0-2. But the women's side, the KPA women's side, the game was rendered a no contest in my eyes when we went to the half, because the score spread was big. At some point in the fourth, the game was just more of like an overall scrimmage. So it was actually a snooze fest. The Strathmore Swords team didn't know what they needed to do. Their technical bench was off, the players were off, and this is a game that most probably they just want to forget completely, because even this series you could see, okay, the Strathmore Swords, give credit to them, they beat the Storms, they swept them in 2 games, but matching up with KPA, the KPA side, is actually a tall ask. But I feel like this team has the ability to steal at least one game, but we'll just have to wait for today's result, because if they lose today, there's a high likelihood that they're going to get swept when they go to the Makanda Gymnasium at some point in time, where KP are going to defend their game at home. So just have to wait and see about that. But Strathmore Swords, if they don't win today, the series is over. And moving on to the KPA men's team, they matched up against the Thunder. KPA won that game. It was a game that was decided by at least 12 points, and they're up 1-0, and game 2 is happening today. So KPA lived up to the expectation. They are the defending champions. They know how to adjust. They know how to make those tweaks in their games, and know how to like match up against teams which is actually pretty important because in the playoffs, the lineup that you put has to, deliver, and even the rotations, you're so not supposed to make any mistakes on that, and they're able to do that. So the Thunder, they just didn't look like they could pose a threat in there. But we just have to wait and see for game two. And I'll just follow up with a video on talking about the game twos that's gonna happen today. But hopefully the Thunder are able to tie up the series at 1 apiece. But for the Strathmore Swords team matching up against the KPA women's team, this is just going to be more likely or not a sweep, and they're just gonna lose all three straight games, and KPA just gonna cruise simply to the finals. But the most exciting series that people should be looking forward to is the Equity versus Zitec Sparks. That's actually going to be very exciting. I feel like this series can play out all 5 games, because if Zitec don't drop games, this can go all 5 games. And Equity versus Ulinzi, I'm not sure where they go from here, because it's just a sad state of affairs if Ulinzi gets swept. So just have to wait and see and check out for game 3. But game 2's KPA versus the Strathmore Swords, you're just gonna wait for game 2's result today, and KPA versus Thunder, you're gonna have to wait for the results today. So yeah, man, that's all I got for you guys. So please leave your feedback in the comment section down below, and I'm out. Peace.